All right, welcome everybody to our first Beyond Access session of the 2021-2022 school year. So excited to have you all here. We have a lot of information to share with you all tonight, but I'm going to do some quick housekeeping pieces before we dive into it. Tonight, as we do in every night with Beyond Access series, you will have an opportunity to ask your questions using the Q&A function. So please type in your questions there. We have folks from the special education office who are going to be answering those questions throughout the presentation. And we've set up some time aside to answer some questions live on the stream towards the end. Tonight, we're going to be talking specifically about special education recovery services. So while you are welcome to ask any question in the Q&A, we're going to address publicly those that pertain to special education recovery services. For all other questions, we're going to take them away. We're going to download them, and we can reach out to you for any questions that are specific to your child's IEP. So don't worry, if you need to ask a question, feel free to ask it. This is the time. At the end of this session, we are recording, so we will upload the session up to our YouTube channel so you can go back and rewatch if you need to. You can share it with any friends or other folks in your community who weren't able to make it tonight and need this information. And I'm also going to be sending out to everyone a link with a survey for tonight's session. So we want to hear your feedback, not only on how we did tonight, but what are the topics that you are interested in so that we can help shape the Beyond Access series. So with all of that aside, thank you again for joining, and I'm going to pass it over to Christina Foti, our Deputy Chief Academic Officer overseeing special education, for some opening remarks. Good evening, Christina.
Good evening, Jose, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We are so excited that you're joining us to launch this year's Beyond Access series. As I shared in my recent letter to families, we know that all students have experienced some learning disruption during the pandemic. However, as I visit schools and have the opportunity to see our students' bright eyes and their safely masked faces, they remind me how resilient they are every single day. They also remind me of the amazing responsibility that we all have to ensure that they can reach their highest potential. On that note, tonight we'll be sharing more information about how we plan to support our students with IEPs through special education recovery services. As many of you know, these services are made possible by stimulus funds from the federal government and are meant to provide services that are in addition to what your child is already receiving through their IEP. I want to highlight that all students in grades K through 12 attending a DOE school are eligible to receive these services. Services will be based on your child's needs, and you do not need to do anything to start the process. Your child's school has already begun planning these services and should be reaching out to you in the upcoming weeks. I also want to take some time to thank our parent leaders. From parents that are active in their school and district communities to the members of the citywide councils on special education and District 75, our parent leaders continue to go above and beyond the call to represent our families. I've seen the work that goes into organizing to meet the needs of our communities in a way that builds bridges and delivers results. So if you are a parent leader joining us tonight, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your partnership and your leadership. To share more information about special education recovery services, tonight I am very, very proudly joined by our host with the most, Jose Rios, John Hammer, the Chief Executive Director of the Special Education Office, Josh Morgenstern, who oversees policy on behalf of the Special Education Office, Kimberly Ramones, our Senior Executive Director of Instruction and Compliance, Mia Delaney Gurley, our Senior Executive Director of Special Education Services and Evaluations, Arwina Vallejo, our Executive Director of School-Based Evaluations and Family Engagement, Suzanne Sanchez, our Senior Director of Therapeutic Services, and Ariana Jaffe and Kevin McGinn from our policy team. We are so delighted to be working with you tonight, and we'll be here both during the presentation, but also behind the scenes to monitor the question and answer and to make sure that all of your questions get answered tonight. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to John Hammer to take it from here. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Christina, for your warm welcome, and more importantly, thank you for your leadership and inspiration. Past 18 months have been extraordinarily challenging for all of us, students, families, and staff alike. And your unwavering commitment to keep our processes and services in place throughout the pandemic allowed our providers and students to have incredible experiences delivering and receiving teletherapy and specialized instruction from home. Now, as we transition back to in-person instruction, I'm extremely grateful to have the opportunity to support the implementation of your vision that all students with IEPs receive recovery services this school year. To our families, I know you're excited about this too, but first we're going to run through some brief updates on what to expect from your child's school this year. So instruction and related services are being provided and will continue to be provided in person to students in schools this school year, unless students apply for medically necessary instruction. Our IEP meetings and other special education meetings will be held remotely unless parent requests for it to be conducted in person. For any in-person meeting to be held in a DOE school, parents must follow the school visitor policy. The school visitor policy requires all visitors aged 12 and older to show proof of at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccination to enter a DOE school building. Special education teachers and providers will continue to follow the DOE health and safety guidance to ensure the health of students and staff. And now I'll hand it over to Mia to walk through some updates for our committees on special education. Mia?
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to report our CSCs, our committees on special education, are open 5 days a week to evaluate and determine the eligibility of students through the IEP process for all students attending non-DOE schools. Evaluations are being conducted by our committees on special education in person by appointment. IEP meetings are currently being conducted remotely, along with social histories, which are also being conducted remotely. But these IEP meetings and social histories can be held in person at the parent's request. For any additional information or to ask questions about your child's case, we ask families to call or email their CSC, and we've included the DOE website information here in this slide for the contact information for each committee on special education.
All right, now we're going to go to Kimberly Ramones for some information on the academic recovery efforts for this coming school year. Hi, Kim.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here tonight with you all. And as it was stated earlier, that special education recovery services are in addition to what your child is already receiving. We want to share a little bit about what the overall academic recovery plan is for all students in the Department of Education, including your child. The DOE has made significant investments for ensuring students are welcomed back strong and well. These investments are in literacy, curriculum, digital fluency, focusing on college and career readiness, and expanding the arts. These particular investments emphasize the instruction and the experiences happen daily in your child's classroom and daily in your child's school environment. There is also additional particular attention to integrating social and emotional learning, focusing on those supports as our students return. Again, emphasizing that academic recovery is focusing on strengthening that daily instruction for all of our students. This information on instruction that students need is solicited from academic screeners that will serve as getting a baseline to understand the foundational skills that students have gained or lost during the pandemic. Based on this information, teachers are positioned to make adjustments to their daily instruction and or deliver intervention instruction to target and refine instruction to meet those foundational skills. These services are convened at the school level and determined by the academic intervention team at your child's school. Different from special education recovery services, as we will get into later on throughout the night, which include recovery services that can be provided during some combination of after school, Saturdays, and/or during the school day. Program schedules determined by each school with input from you. And these student schedules will be determined based on individual student needs with input from you. Passing it over back to John.
Thank you, Kim. So now a little bit more on special education recovery services, which I know our parents have come here to learn more about tonight. So what are special education recovery services? Special ed recovery services are targeted instruction and interventions to address students' IEP goals. And this would consist of specialized instruction and related services, speech, OT, PT, and counseling. These services will be available to all students with IEPs to help close gaps brought on by the pandemic's disruption to learning. As Christina mentioned at the top, these services supplement, they do not replace a student's IEP programs and services. The recommended special education recovery services are going to be based on the student's progress and other data, as well as family input. Is my child eligible for special education recovery services? The good news here is yes, all students with IEPs are eligible to receive special education recovery services. And the intensity and the frequency, how often these services will be provided, how many services will be offered, is going to be based on each student's individual needs. So over the course of the school year, starting in November, DOE schools are going to make services available to all students. Schools will begin with students that they identify as most impacted. They're going to consider progress monitoring data throughout the pandemic, as well as other factors, like whether a student had access to a certified bilingual provider during last school year, whether a student was in temporary housing at any point during last school year, whether the student was not served by a special education teacher, and whether or not the student was able to access related services through teletherapy last school year. And of course, also looking to see if the student was able to attend school at a rate above 90%. Really asking schools to provide services and to all students with IEPs, but starting with the students with the highest needs. So each DOE school is going to offer an extended day after school program or Saturday program or some combination of those two to deliver special education recovery services. The services that are offered are going to be made based on the individual needs of your child, and that those would also guided by standards that were set by the Central Special Education Office on students' level of need. While each school's special education recovery services program may look different, they will be offered in cycles as the school year progresses. Kim, back to you to talk a little bit through IEP goals and targeted instruction.
Thank you, John. So again, what is special education? What are special education recovery services? First, targeted instruction to address IEP goals. Small group instruction that is designed to meet IEP goals that did not make expected progress during the past 18 months. This targeted instruction will be delivered by a special education teacher or related service provider and supported by paraprofessionals in small groups of up to 5 to 6 students. Again, because these services are meant to supplement, not supplant, this instruction should align and support across your child's daily content area from the instruction that they receive during the day. Special education recovery services also include intervention. Intervention is in addition to the targeted instruction focused on IEP goals. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so students may also receive literacy and math interventions in their small groups, and in some cases, students will receive more intensive interventions in groups of one to two, as determined by the academic screening that is occurring right now. You'll be notified of the special education recovery services, which will include any interventions delivered by the special education teacher. Interventions for literacy are based in phonics, the letter-sound relationships, and phonemic awareness, for understanding that words are made up of sounds. Math interventions are based in calculation and the foundational skills necessary to successfully complete algebra. Turning it over to Suzanne, who will talk about the related services portion for special education recovery services.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you, Jose, for this opportunity this evening. And very excited, super excited to talk to families about special education recovery related services that will be offered to students whose IEP recommends services at their school site. These will be set out on notice of special education recovery services, and schools will be informing families about the school schedule. As John mentioned earlier, each school will be setting their recovery services schedule, and programming or scheduling may look different in different schools, but every student whose IEP recommends OT, PT, speech, or counseling will be offered those recovery services, either through an extended day or a Saturday program. Students who are not able to participate in their school's related service program will have the opportunity and the option to attend Saturday related service program at 2 sites per borough. So we'll be hosting Saturday recovery services for families for whom that schedule works better at 2 sites per borough. And your child's school will be sharing this information with you as they begin planning and scheduling their own recovery services programming. It's important to know that related recovery services may not be delivered in exactly the same way as the IEP recommends those services. In some cases, recovery services may be offered or provided in a group setting rather than in an individual setting, or in a different location than they're provided during the school day. These services will continue to support your students' achievement of their IEP goals and may be provided in a way that looks different than what is recommended on the IEP. In some cases, your child's recovery services will be provided by their school day OT, PT, speech, or counselor. And in some cases, if their school day provider is not available, an alternate provider will be assigned to your school's recovery program, or if you're sending your child to Saturday services. It's very important to understand and remember that any student whose IEP recommends assistive technology or augmentative alternative communication device, bring their device to recovery services or recovery instruction so they can participate to the greatest extent possible using their recommended device. Next slide, Jose. Thank you. Very excited to talk a little bit about an exciting and unique program that the Department of Education is offering this year. The SEED program, which stands for Sensory Exploration, Education, and Discovery Program. The SEED program this year is going to be offered on a limited basis at 10 sites across the city, 2 per borough. The SEED initiative is going to support students with disabilities, helping them to develop the opportunity to strengthen and grow really important and critical sensory skills. The program is designed to support students who have intensive and significant sensory needs that are impacting the student's ability to be successful in their school environment, successful socially and academically, or whatever the student's instructional program looks like. SEED sites will be available at one of the 10 sites after school hours, Monday through Thursday, and on Saturdays at each of the 10 locations. In a very exciting collaboration, the SEED program will be led by an occupational therapist and supported by a special education teacher. This provides a really unique and special opportunity for the occupational therapist and the special educator to not only support one another, but to support the children and students who are participating in this program. Each site will use very specific and intentionally designed therapeutic equipment. This equipment will be accessible to all students regardless of their physical and ambulation status. The program will be pairing these specialized sensory equipments with a social emotional learning curriculum along with sensory activities. Something that we're also very excited about the SEED program is the opportunity to partner with parents. And we'll talk about that. Jose, if you could go to the next slide. As the SEED program will run through 10 cycles, so students, the first group of students will participate in a 10-week cycle, and then we will have the opportunity to move to another group of students for the next 10-week cycle. A sample SEED session would look like an initial activity with social emotional learning exercises and a social emotional learning check-in. Then the therapist and the special education teacher will be going through the sensory enrichment stations, obstacle course, swings, rock climbing wall, exploring different materials that elicit and bring out different sensory motor skills and sensory motor feelings in students. We will be very excited to welcome parents for closing social emotional activities, what we would call a checkout and closing activity, and a wrap up where the therapist and or special education teacher will share a bit about the session with the family or caregiver and provide 1 or 2 suggestions around sensory integration, sensory skill development that the family or caregiver can carry over at home for the next week. This is a very unique and exciting program that we are just really looking forward to launching towards the middle end of November. Look forward to your school sharing more information with you on this program. And important to remember, again, the program is starting small with a bit of a limited capacity starting this school year, and students will cycle through. So if a student is interested and eligible, if they're not participating in the first 10-week cycle, they may be invited for the second 10-week cycle. And we are looking forward to sharing information with you on this and continuing working together with everybody in this very exciting program. Thank you, Jose.
All right.
Thank you,
Now,
Suzanne. Sorry, Jose.
no, I was just going to pivot back to you, John. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, for really always being able to ensure that our related services are delivered in a way that not only benefit our students, but also extremely fun. And really excited about these SEED sites and excited about the things that we've seen from our speech OT PT providers through teletherapy and getting back this school year. So thank you. Little bit of notes and have seen some Q&A in the chat around transportation services. So if your child will be participating in after-school special education recovery services and is recommended for special ed transportation on their IEP, transportation may be available at the end of the program each day if you register for the program by a date to be announced by the school. If your child will be participating in Saturday special education recovery services, Metro cards will be available upon request. For students who cannot use public transportation, reimbursement may be available for taxi, rideshare, and or driving. Just a note on this point here, we have really sent some clear guidance out to our schools to prioritize the review of students with specialized transportation recommendations for special education recovery services. We want schools to make determinations around the level of services that are going to be needed early and get that information inputted into DOE systems so that OPT can begin the process of identifying routes for this recovery program. So we are working very hard to be able to provide that transportation and schools are working hard to prioritize those students so that we can begin planning for that. Next slide, please. So how do you request? How does a parent request special education recovery services for my child? Good thing is you will not need to request these services. Your school will be reaching out to you to initiate the process. And again, these services are going to be available to all students with IEPs. Just this morning, we sent information to all schools around parent outreach and expectations for parent outreach and the development of the Special Education Recovery Services Notice. So information went out to schools today, including a training for special education teachers and related service providers on how to consider the needs of individual students and how to conduct outreach to families and develop the Special Education Recovery Service Notice in CSIS. This is a notice that was made available to schools last night in CSIS. And so we're very excited about that new development, and know that that is going to lead to a lot of outreach to families in the next couple of weeks. So schools will start the process for every student with IEP, and they will develop those individualized plans that are going to meet the needs of each student. And as I mentioned, schools are going to start reaching out to you in the coming weeks between now and mid-November. That training is available to them now. That document is available to them now. They're reviewing those materials and they're beginning outreach in the next couple of weeks. When your provider contacts you, when the special education teacher or your related service provider contacts you, it's important that you know that your consideration in developing your child's plan for special education recovery services will be taken into account. We know you spent a good amount of time working with your child during blended and remote learning, and we want to hear about the impact of blended and remote learning, hear how your child was able to progress or areas of concern during that period of blended and remote learning in the consideration and development of this plan. So this is a conversation with you around what sets of supports and services are going to help your child get back on track, where your child was able to make progress during the pandemic, and where we might need to provide a little bit more support. After that conversation, you are going to receive a notice which will outline the special education recovery services that will be provided. That notice will break out the specialized instruction, the speech, the OT, the PT, or the counseling services that will be recommended for your child, and the number of hours of service that we will be providing. And then once you receive that notice, you're going to be able to register for those services through your NYCDOE account or by contacting your child's school. So next steps. First, your child is going to reach out to you in the coming weeks to gather your input. If you have questions, you want to prepare for that, you might reach out to your child's teacher and ask for a copy of that IEP. If you don't already have it, or review the progress made towards your child's IEP goals and the most recent finalized IEP. Your school is going to develop an individualized notice of the special education recovery services that will be available for your child. And after you've received this notice, you're going to be able to register for those services through NYCDOE or by talking to your child's school. If you don't have an NYCDOE account, it might be a good time to register for one. Ask your school to help you get one set up. Not only will you be able to register for recovery services in NYCDOE, but you'll also be able to see things like recommended programs and services on your child's IEP, and the names of the special education teachers and related service providers that are servicing your student this school year. So very important information in NYCDOE around special education services that are being provided to your child. So if you've not already done that, strongly recommend that you do in advance of this conversation around recovery services. If you need help, if you have questions specific to your school on how the program will look, those are questions to direct your child's school. Each school is going to be delivering recovery services a little bit differently and based on individual school community, parent preference, teacher and provider input around when they are most able to work to provide these services, things like that. Ask your child's principal or child's teacher around what planning is looking like or what they are thinking about for recovery services, whether these will be offered after school or on Saturdays, some combination of both. Good time to check in with your child's school in the coming weeks about that. If you have general questions or just need a little bit of support working with your school, you can always reach out to us, special education at schools.nycd.gov. We monitor this inbox regularly. We respond to families within 24, 48 hours, and we will absolutely support. If you don't have access to email, you can always call 311. They'll get your information over to us and we'll follow up. Jose?
Sorry, having trouble unmuting myself. It's always the one thing. We're gonna talk about so thanks, John, and folks, for sharing a lot of information about recovery services. We're gonna share some information about additional things that are happening this year, and we're gonna start off going back to Kimberly Ramones to talk a little bit about the supports that we're giving students who are 21 and older.
Thank you, Jose. So this year, if a student turned 21 or older during last school year, and they have not yet completed the requirements for a diploma or exit credential, they may be eligible to return for the school year. If you think your child might be eligible, please reach out to the principal at your child's last attended school. Additionally, our transition and college access centers, or otherwise known as our TCACs, are positioned to also provide consultancy services for our students. This includes providing assistance with intakes at our adult services agencies, our intakes at vocational programs, college applications and supporting documents, or any other connections or referrals that need to be made in order to ensure that students will be engaged in the appropriate adult programs and services. Transition consultancy services can be provided through online platforms or telephone conferences, and in-person can be provided upon request. And on our next slide, we just have for you, again, our contact information for the TCACs that are located in every borough and for the District 75 Transition Office. Next slide. Okay, so just pause for a minute here. These are the the email addresses for the TCACs, which are in every borough, and for District 75.
All right, I'm gonna let these up on the screen for a second. And then I think next we're moving on to talk a little bit about the evaluation process.
That's right.
And so I'm welcoming in Arwina Vallejo into this conversation. Hi, Arwina.
Hi, Jose, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join tonight. I'm here to talk to you about the evaluation for special education eligibility. And I think to start, I'd like to focus on three particular areas, and that's our pre-referral considerations, parental consent, and the assessment process. So I'd like to lead with the understanding that prior to, during, and at the eligibility and decision-making stage, we see parents as our partners to our clinicians and a critical part of the, a critical member of the IEP team, and particularly helpful to the school psychologist who's completing the evaluation. Parents know their child best, and we encourage our clinicians to rely on you and to rely on those classroom teachers for a deep understanding of how we're defining the suspected area of disability. At the pre-referral stage, there are certainly considerations that we need to explore in order to determine whether a student has received appropriate instruction through general education interventions, including multi-tiered systems of support and other factors that need to be investigated and addressed during an initial evaluation. These can be inconsistent school history, COVID-related trauma, medical information, inadequate participation in remote learning, and access to general education interventions. We want to make sure that the results that we are analyzing as a part of the assessment process are accurate and are fair and represent a student well. So similarly, when we consider whether we're referring a student, whether to refer a student for an evaluation or upon receipt of a parent's initial referral, the school principal will ensure that we've collected sufficient consideration and information around alternatives to special education while Of course, these do not delay the recording of the initial evaluation. It doesn't delay the obtaining of parental consent or moving forward with the initial evaluation. Parents should expect to be invited to a social history meeting, and that's really our opportunity to discuss informed consent, but it's also our window into so much that we don't know about a student, and we appreciate your trust and we appreciate your partnership and your willingness to share that information with us. At the assessment stage, again, expect to be our partner. School psychologists will be engaging parents through a prior written notice, a PWN process, and in conversations regarding the assessments that they plan on conducting based on the area of suspected disability. If you were with us during the period of remote instruction, you know that there was less reliance upon standardized evaluations because the circumstances just didn't allow for this to take place. Happy to say that our return to school also means that school psychologists are conducting in-person assessments, but they are also taking away everything that was learned during that other time, right? They're taking away the importance of gaining information through collecting that information through multiple sources of data. They're taking away a very strong partnership with parents and teachers, and that is something that we're going to continue, and that has been a part of extensive training for our clinicians as we welcome them back this year. When we integrate this with face-to-face standardized assessments, such as cognitive assessments, achievement assessment, specialized assessments to determine students' unique needs, we are confident that we have a very high quality evaluation process in place for our students. And again, none of this is new practice. This has always been the best practice, but in order to ensure that our clinicians are ready to now handle the multiple new considerations that are involved in the assessment process, we've committed to make sure that our already very strong team of school psychologists that service our schools are given all the resources in order to support high quality evaluations. Jose, we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So after assessments are completed, an IEP meeting will take place, and this is where we expect the team to go back to that very specific question of referral and answer it, and answer the question, what's impeding a student's progress in the general education curriculum, and what does this particular student need in order to support their learning and in order to ensure that they're reaching the shared goals that we're developing. And finally, at the IEP meeting, the team will make a recommendation and identify whether the student meets the criteria for a disability. And I think that the important takeaway here is that whether they do meet the criteria for special education services or not, the outcome of the meeting, regardless, is to support the student in their learning. And that's what we're committed to do. So yeah, thank you so much. If we could go to the next slide.
Do you see after conducting assessments?
I do. Was there another, sorry, about specialized, about all of our new specialized assessments?
There isn't, so I think you should just talk about those.
I will.
And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so folks can see your face as you talk about them.
Okay, no problem. So on to some very exciting news. School psychologists received training on cross-battery assessment, and they now have access to cross-battery assessment software called XFAS, which they can use for their evaluations. And this is a process that school psychologists that calls our school psychologists to use multiple assessment batteries. So that can be a combination of different IQ tests. It can be a combination of different academic batteries. And the purpose of this is to ensure that their decisions are guided by a very full picture of a student's cognitive or academic abilities, because we're able to use multiple sources and sort of bring them all together. So all school psychologists have access to this XFAS software. We're very excited to see the integration and very deep analysis that we're already seeing in some of the evaluations that are taking place. So what we know is that no two evaluations should be the same. The goal here is to be as specific as possible, as targeted as possible with our testing so that there's a better understanding of the area of disability. And so that we fully understand the cognitive processes that are impacting learning for a student. So this is a new push. This is an enhanced practice. School psychologists citywide have access now to an expanded a toolkit, which means that the breadth and the depth of their evaluation process is going to be great. They can integrate outcomes from multiple sources. We're very excited that our school-based clinicians now have access to additional assessments such as the CTOP, which tests for phonological processing. They have received training on the dyslexia index of the Y-4. They've received extensive training on additional extended batteries of the WJ4, which has been on the field, but our clinicians have we welcomed them with a week of extensive training in the determination of specific learning disabilities. So I know that oftentimes there's a question of, can a school psychologist answer a question around a specific learning disability, let's say, such as a print-based disability? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Our school psychologists are trained to define specific learning disabilities, and they have the tools to do this. We welcomed our psychologists with a 5-day, all-day training, not only to understand the considerations that now need to be taken with standardized testing, but to also make sure that they walk away with understanding the assessments that they have available to them and understanding how they're going to use that to make very specific determinations around learning disabilities. And being able to correctly identify and pinpoint those specific needs of our students will mitigate bias. It'll allow our teams to implement highly individualized, highly focused interventions. And we look forward to sharing in the near future further developments of these toolkits that are going to happen throughout the year in other academic areas. Thanks, Jose, for the time, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Arwena, and thank you, everyone. We know we've shared a lot of information with you all tonight, and folks have been using the Q&A to type in their questions. And we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to spend that time going through some of the most common questions that I thought. So DOE folks, hang in there with me. I have some questions for you, and I'm gonna call y'all out for these. So the first question, and since we just finished with Arwena, I'll go straight back to Arwena. Arwena, the first question that I see as a common thread in here is folks asking, and I know you talked about this, are assessments in person this year, or are they fully remote this year?
They are in person. They are in person. We are continuing the use of our web-based assessments, but students that are in school can be assessed in person.
Great. Suzanne, I'm going to come to you next. So someone in the chat wrote, and I've seen this like a couple of times, that their child already has an RSA for their regular IEP services. Are they eligible for recovery services, or does having an RSA stop them from getting recovery services?
Oh, they are absolutely eligible for recovery services, and those two service delivery models are not linked at all. So a child who has an RSA will be invited to attend their school's recovery services program as well.
Thanks so much for that, Suzanne. Another question that I'm saying, and I think this is a John Hammer question. John, I see folks asking a lot of questions about, are these services going to be added to my child's IEP? How will these services be documented? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So they will be offered and documented through a form that we're calling the Special Education Recovery Services Notice. And your child's teacher and/or related service provider will discuss this form with you in a phone call in the coming weeks. What you can expect it will look like, it will provide a brief overview of what special education recovery services are, and then it will list out the programs and services that are on your child's IEP, and the additional services that will be offered through the recovery services program. Schools and case managers will be walking you through this in the next couple of weeks. and excited that you will be able to, that you will receive a copy of what will be provided in advance of services getting started.
John, folks are also asking if there are age limits for these services, or are there specific grades for the services? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So, I mean, the recovery services program that we're speaking about tonight is, this is a DOE program for students in grades K through 12. So students that were in preschool last year, your schools will be getting to know them this year as they enter kindergarten. They'll be looking at things like screening data and just seeing how they're adjusting to school and making some determinations, conducting outreach to you to talk to you about how recovery services might look for your child. But really, any school-age student in a DOE school will be eligible for these services, both in District 75 and in Districts 1 through 32 settings. And so excited about that.
Kim, I'm coming to you next. I see some folks asking, they heard you say academic recovery, special education recovery. Are these the same things, or is my child getting different things from different folks?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad to be able to give more information. So special education recovery is part of overall academic recovery. And so during these, so please keep in mind that all of the overall recovery efforts at your child's school, which again focuses on enhancing the day-to-day instruction that happens in your child's classroom every day within your child's school. And so those overall academic recovery efforts that include emphasis on literacy, focusing on preparing for college and career readiness for our older students, focusing on digital literacy, focusing on social and emotional and academic learning integration. Those are all parts of our the Department of Education's investments in overall academic recovery, which applies to all students, including students with IEPs. Special education recovery is, again, part of the overall academic recovery, but the focus on our special education recovery is targeted towards instruction for your child's IEP goals that did not meet expected progress during the past 18 months. Also focusing on intervention that can be delivered in small group instruction or small groups of 1 to 2 is determined by those academic screeners, as well as focusing on related services as my colleagues shared. So there are some slight additions for special education recovery, but again, it does sit part of the overall academic recovery plan for the Department of Education.
And folks, to learn more about an overview of academic recovery and screeners and all that, Kim and I are going to be back next week talking about it with some other of our colleagues from the instructional team. Right, Kim?
Yes, yes. And I would also say if you would like to know a little bit more about the specific choices of supplements or programs that are happening at your child's school, the best person to speak to is your child's teacher and your child's principal about those specifics that are happening at your school.
Thanks, Kim. All right, folks, we're getting ready. We're getting really close to the close, and we could stay here all night. But I want to assure you that even though we're closing this webinar down, you all still have opportunities to ask your questions. As John said in the next step slide, if you have questions specific about how your school is going to run the program, the best folks to reach out for that is going to be your child's school. They're going to know because every school is going to be programmed differently based on what's going to work for them at that school. So if you have questions specific to how your school is going to run the program, reach out to your schools. If you have general questions or questions about your child's IEP that you need help with or need help getting to your school, you can always reach out to us at special education at schools.nyc.gov. I almost forgot our own inbox because I haven't said it in a while. But I do want to hand it back over to Christina to give us some closing thoughts. And I know that we've shared a lot of information with you all, but I do want to say before I hand it over to Christina, we have been recording. We will be uploading this to the YouTube channel. So you will be able to go back, rewatch, re-listen, share, all of those things. So tonight is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of the conversation. Does that sound right, Christina?
It sounds absolutely right. And I really just want to take a moment to thank the team that did this presentation this evening. John Hammer, Kim Ramones, Jose, Mia, Kim, Josh, Ariana, Kevin, Suzanne, Arwina. I think I said Mia, but if I didn't, I want to say Mia again. We're just so grateful for each of you. And I know families that have joined us today, for those of you who know all of us well, I think you agree that you cannot find a more dedicated group of people spearheading this work. So I feel very grateful to have the team that is in front of you tonight. And I feel even more grateful to be working in partnership with each of the families that are here. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is, as Jose said, very much just the beginning. We are so grateful for all of you, and thank you again for joining us this evening. We look forward to speaking more soon.
Have a great night, folks, and stay tuned for our upcoming sessions for Beyond Access. This is the launch of a whole year, so we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.